Super Mario 64 is my favorite game of all time. It was one of the first video games I ever played, and from the moment I first walked into Peach's castle, I knew there was something special about it. This game holds a legacy like no other. It changed the way we think about game design. It formed an entire genre. Hell, its controls were so perfectly crafted that most 3D platformers today have a hard time even capturing the smallest bit of what made Mario so fun to control in the game. In this video, I want to take a deep dive into what makes this game the masterpiece that it is, whether that be the movement, the levels, the music, but most importantly, why after over 25 years, this game is still played daily by thousands. And so without further ado, here is the legacy of Super Mario 64.
Okie dokie.
To fully understand what made this game so great and cemented it in history as one of the most important video games ever made, we have to go back. All the way back to 1993 when Star Fox for the Super Nintendo was finalizing development. Star Fox was able to achieve actual 3D graphics with the use of the Super FX chip found inside the cartridge. And after seeing this, Miyamoto started to conceive an idea for a 3D Mario game. Around the same time, Nintendo started work on their next big console that they would codename Project Reality. The goal for Project Reality was to create a console capable of running games with full 3D environments and graphics. And after learning about this, Super Mario 64 was no longer an idea that Miyamoto was conceiving, it was now becoming a reality. See what I did there? The bulk of Super Mario 64's development was spent on how Mario would control. Miyamoto wanted Mario's movement to be easy to learn the basics of, but difficult to master them and fully make use of every move. Which is the exact reason why Mario has such a wide range of moves in the game, with some of them involving multiple button presses and or analog movements to pull off, like the side flip and triple jump. Instead of building Mario's movement around the levels, the team instead wanted to focus on the levels last and build them after Mario's movement was complete, so they would essentially be building the levels around how Mario would control in them, which allowed for them to be more creative with the stages and create the fun and open platforming jungle gyms we see in the finished product. Although the idea of Super Mario 64 being a 3D game was heavily inspired by Star Fox, the 3D platforming aspect was instead inspired by a 3D Yoshi game that was to be made by an outside studio, but was ultimately cancelled due to Nintendo being very protective of the characters at the time. But then a year later, they let Philips release this shit.
Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi? I hope she made lots of spaghetti. Luigi!
The iconic interactive Mario head on the title screen actually has more lore than you might think. Many sources say that the head was actually intended to be featured in a scrapped Mario Paint 3D, while others say it was made exclusively for Mario 64 to show off the power of the N64 right as the player opened the game. The interactive part of it, however, was made to familiarize the player with the N64's new analog controls, which could be pretty hard to adjust to at first. And since this game practically invented the 3D platformer genre, introducing analog controls to the player wouldn't be the only struggle the team would face. Things like stomping on a Goomba, which was incredibly easy to do in a 2D game, was a lot more difficult in a 3D environment. Trying to judge where you would land after a jump was almost impossible because of how difficult it was to understand the depth of a 3D environment while you view it from a pretty much flat TV screen. In order to combat this, Mario, along with every object, enemy, and character, was given a shadow beneath them, regardless of if it was a dark area or not, to help the player judge where they are on the screen, and more importantly, where the enemies are. And lastly, to finish up the development background of this game, I wanted to talk about Mario's animations. During early development, the team was planning on using motion capture technology to capture the different moves that Mario would do, but instead, they opted to fully animate his moves digitally. However, in order to give the team a feel for what he wanted those animations to look like, Miyamoto actually acted some of them out himself. It is very possible that the animation for moves like the single jump, double jump, long jump, and crawl came from Miyamoto jumping and crawling around the room in order to show the team what he wanted them to look like. Which is not only a little bit funny, but really shows the dedication and care he put into this game. And so after a 3-year development period spanning from 1993 to 1996, Super Mario 64 would release here in North America on September 29th, 1996, along with the N64 as a launch title, and was the game to buy if you got an N64 on launch day. No, really, it was the game to get on launch day, because it literally was the only game you could get here in North America. Well, other than Pilot Wings. Upon opening the game for the first time, getting to the file select, watching the opening cutscene, and seeing Mario jump out of a pipe, you're met with almost silence. only hearing the sound of birds chirping and the flowing water under the moat. No music pushing you to rescue the princess from the clutches of the evil Bowser. No Goomba for you to stomp on. Just the relaxing sounds of nature. It's such a beautiful way to start off the game and really makes you feel relaxed. But I mean, it makes sense. Nothing that's been presented to you thus far has alluded to any urgent threat. All you know is that Peach baked a cake for Mario and invited him over to the castle to see it. From a gameplay perspective, this is absolutely genius as well. For a lot of people who played this game around the years it was released, it was probably not only the first 3D platformer they played, it was probably the first 3D game they'd ever played. The courtyard allows for us to learn how to control Mario in this game without feeling obligated to rush inside the castle, because again, no threat has been presented to us thus far. The courtyard has an open area for Mario to triple jump, long jump, and side flip, trees to leap off of, a body of water to swim in. Pretty much every important aspect of Mario's moveset is covered in just this one area. Well, every aspect except one, the combat. Very cleverly, the developers opt out of having something for Mario to punch, kick, or throw, as they want to introduce that later, again establishing this false sense of security to the player that there is no threat. However, once the player feels comfortable enough to progress inside the castle, the threat is immediately presented, in the form of a message from Bowser, telling Mario that no one's home and to leave the castle. Right after reading this, we can obviously tell that this is a lie, as a Toad is standing right there at the entrance, ready to tell Mario about how Bowser has trapped everyone, including the princess, inside the castle, and that he needs to venture inside the paintings to collect all the power stars and defeat Bowser. And with that, the player has not only got a decent understanding of the controls and is probably partially adjusted to the 3D environment, but they know exactly what they have to do, all before even entering the first level. Peach's Castle is one of the coolest hub worlds in all of gaming. Its music is so catchy and simple that I sometimes find myself humming it as I wander around its many rooms. The castle holds so many secrets and little details that it almost feels like its own level. You have portraits and tiny holes to jump into that lead to secret levels with stars hidden in them, bunnies to catch, beams of light that transport you high into the sky, and so many different floors, all with their own distinct vibe. It really feels like a giant castle fit for a royal family to live in. I was really disappointed by Super Mario Odyssey's Peach's Castle that just only had one room. We really haven't seen the castle this detailed since it debuted in this game. The castle is probably one of the most iconic parts of this entire game, and is the first thing I think of when this game is mentioned, and plays a huge part in the legacy of it. But jumping into the levels themselves, see what I did there? This is where Mario's moment really starts to shine. The very first level, Bob-omb Battlefield, is this giant sandbox full of objects and enemies for Mario to throw, punch, and stomp, all backed with its iconic music that just makes you feel free. I mean, yeah, you were told to go venture to the top of the mountain and defeat King Bob-omb, but there is no linear path forcing you to go there. And furthermore, you don't even have to. Even though you selected a specific mission, you could still go for other stars like Behind Chain Chomp's Gate or the 8 Red Coin mission. And if you find a star too difficult, you can just go for another one. There are 120 stars in total, however, to unlock the final level, you only need 70. Allowing players to skip stars, and even entire levels at times, is the reason that this is one of the most replayable video games of all time. You can beat it in so many different ways. And I think this freedom of being able to beat the game however you want heavily encourages speedrunning of this game, which I will talk a lot about later. Whomp's Fortress is my favorite stage in the entire game. The level rewards mastery of Mario's movement like no other. If you put in enough effort, you can easily blaze through this stage and collect every single star in a matter of minutes. The first mission here, Chip Off Whomp's Block, sees you scaling to the top of the fortress, avoiding enemies and waiting for platforms to move. However, with the use of a well-timed triple jump or side flip, in combination with a wall jump and dive, you can skip all of that and be at the top of the fortress in seconds. And this sentiment holds true for pretty much every mission here. Instead of taking the cannon to this star, you could just side flip and wall jump up here fast. And on this star, instead of waiting for the owl, you can perform a well-timed triple jump and wall jump to get into the cage that way. Experimenting with the movement and being able to complete stars in a variety of different ways was one of the big things Miyamoto wanted the player to do. He wanted you to come up with your own solutions and be able to test them on the spot, and he wanted you to explore the levels at your own pace, whether that pace be slow and calculated or fast and well-timed. At some point during very early development, there was an idea to have the game be played somewhat like a 2D Mario game, where the levels would be linear with not a lot of 3D area to move around in. But this idea was quickly scrapped as Miyamoto believed this wouldn't be ambitious enough. However, a lot of the DNA of this idea can be seen in the Bowser levels. Each one is a very linear platforming gauntlet meant to test the player's abilities before they face Bowser. These levels are a lot of fun to find skips in and try to get to the goal as fast as you can. Very similar to how fun it is to blaze through a 2D Mario level. These linear levels fit well for them being a road to Bowser, but I am so glad they didn't decide to make the entire game like this, because it wouldn't nearly be as impactful and important. The actual fights with Bowser himself are incredible. It will never not be fun to just grab Bowser by the tail and spin the control stick as fast as you can, before finally sending him flying into the air while Mario says his iconic line assuming the sexuality of Bowser. I love how you have to partially time your throw so Bowser will hit the explosive spike ball thingies, because it just adds that little bit of strategy that makes speedrunning the level so much more satisfying. Hitting perfect throws on the last stage where you have to make him hit the bombs 3 times is one of the most satisfying things you can do in this game. And since I mentioned Mario's iconic voice line he says after throwing Bowser, why don't we talk about Mario's voice? Super Mario 64 was the first Mario game to feature a voice for Mario, and his voice actor was none other than the incredibly iconic and well-known Chris Pratt. Oh, sorry, 25 years too early. Charles Martinet. Now this game wasn't actually Charles' debut as Mario. He actually had voiced the plumber one time before in the 1992 Super Mario Pinball Machine.
I'm a super now.
For some reason, but had his first game debut in Super Mario 64. While Mario doesn't speak full sentences too often, he does make sounds when performing almost all of his moves. These little sounds add a lot of charm to the game and make the character feel so much more alive and would become a staple of every 3D Mario game to come. But Mario having a voice wouldn't be the only thing the player would hear. As I touched on before briefly with Peach's Castle and Bob-omb Battlefield, this game's soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. Even from the moment you start the game and are on the title screen, you have this wonderful track that is just beaming with excitement, ready to get you in the game. And once you move on to the file select, it moves to this beautiful slower track that is almost soothing in a sense. And then you have the tracks that play for the different levels in the game. Cool Cool Mountain has this festive and blissful track that is a perfect fit for the level's Winter Wonderland vibe. But then you have the theme of Dire Dire Docks. It's incredibly slow and peaceful. It's a song you could easily fall asleep to. It's soothing and calm. It doesn't push you forward, rather holds you back in a sense. It encourages the player to slow down and take in the sights, and is one of my favorite tracks in the entire franchise. Bowser's Road. The theme that plays throughout every Bowser stage in the game. This track just has that Bowser energy, and I would not be surprised if we see a rendition of it play during the Super Mario Bros. Movie Illumination is working on. It would be perfect for a scene of Bowser's troops marching into battle. The soundtrack of Super Mario 64 is one of the most iconic in gaming history, thanks to the work of the legendary Koji Kondo. Each and every track brings the world of this game to life, and while I'm nowhere close to familiar with how music composition works, I can still appreciate the soundtrack for how incredible it is. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Soundtracks are one of the most important parts of a video game, not only because of the emotions they can convey, but the memories they can hold. Every time I listen to this game's OST, I'm able to partially relive and remember some of my favorite moments with it. And whether that be remembering the pure awe and excitement I felt in my first time romping through Bob-omb Battlefield, or the mystical wonder I felt in the soothing atmosphere of Jolly Roger Bay, Super Mario 64's soundtrack will always be there to remind me of the memories I hold within this polygonal world. The OST of this game without a doubt set the stage for how a 3D platformer could sound, furthermore showing the strong legacy of this game. The Mario series has long been known for its creativity, and no other game exemplifies this sentiment better than Super Mario 64. Not only are the levels creative, but so are the missions and the characters. Bob-omb Battlefield is this giant war zone where the Bob-omb buddies are fighting against the evil Bob-ombs in a massive turf war. Leading the evil Bob-ombs is the giant King Bob-omb, who has long ruled over the land and recently became even stronger with the star that Bowser entrusted to him. We see cannons spread all throughout the battlefield that both sides make use of to launch projectiles at each other. In Cool Cool Mountain, you have to carefully escort this small baby penguin all the way down the mountain to reunite it with its mother and maybe throw it off the edge after she gives you the star. In Jolly Roger Bay, you venture into an abandoned sunken ship deep below the sea and drain the water out of it so it can once again float atop the sea. A lot of the missions and locations in Super Mario 64 can leave it up to the player to use their imagination to form their own story of why certain things are the way that they are in these worlds. Why were the Bob-ombs at war? Whose ship sank in Jolly Roger Bay? Who used to live in the underwater city found in Wet Dry World? These worlds are not only fun to explore and complete objectives in, they're fun to theorize about, and they feel alive. Many games today are unable to replicate that sense of imagination that Super Mario 64 so vividly conveys. I remember watching my brother play this game when I was really young, before I myself even played it, and how badly I wanted to play along with him because of how imaginative the world looked. And if it weren't for some of the limitations of the N64, I probably would have been able to. According to Miyamoto in an interview from 1996, the year the game came out, Luigi was originally supposed to be in the game as a playable character alongside Mario. You would have been able to plug in two N64 controllers and play through the entire game with a friend. However, due to memory issues and the N64's heavy limitations, he had to be cut very late into development. But even after this interview, many still believe that Luigi was hidden somewhere in the game due to this one pixely texture that seemed to read out the sentence, "L is real 2401. So many people interpreted this sentence in so many different ways. Many thought it meant you had to do 2,401 of something to unlock Luigi, collect 2,401 coins, walk around the star statue 2,401 times, beat Bowser's scrawny Koopa ass 2,401 times. Others went a little deeper though, connecting the numbers of 2401 to the release date of Paper Mario on the N64. That game released on February 4th, 2001, and when you write that date out in numbers, you get 2 representing the February, 4 representing the 4th, and 01 representing 2001, coming all together to form the iconic 2401. I remember spending hours looking up online theories about Luigi and all the different ways to unlock him, and wondering to myself if he really was in the game. This one rumor alone is a huge part of the game's legacy, and it's something almost anyone who's ever even heard of the game knows about. And although talk on the L is real 2401 rumor died out in the 2010s, this wouldn't be the end of the infamous Luigi and Mario 64 saga. On July 25th, 2020, a massive Nintendo data leak took place, and within this data leak was a portion of Mario 64 source code. After scouring this code, people found that there was parts of an unused model scattered all around the leaked code. And once they were able to put everything together, 24 years and exactly 1 month after Mario 64's release in Japan, coming all together to form the iconic 2401, L was real. The model for Luigi was found. The debate of if Luigi was really in Super Mario 64 had finally come to an end. It was incredible, all thanks to a group of very talented people coming together to leak this code and then put together this model. And illegally breaching Nintendo servers wasn't the only time a group of talented people had come together to keep this game's legacy as strong as ever. Almost immediately after its release, Super Mario 64 became an incredibly popular game to speedrun. There were so many different ways to complete it that finding an optimal route could lead you beating the game incredibly fast. And combine this with the game's incredible movement options, broken tricks like the backwards long jump, and passionate community, Super Mario 64 didn't only become one of the most fun games to speedrun of all time, it became one of the most popular and active speedrunning communities ever. To this day, Super Mario 64 sits at the top of the speedrun.com leaderboard as the game with the second most runs submitted to date, clocking in at a total of 32,928 recorded runs. Only getting beaten out by Subway Surfers because of a TikTok trend. And I mean, it isn't even a speedrun. The goal of it isn't to go fast, it's actually to survive as long as possible. So it's less of a speedrun and more of a survive run? I don't know. But what I do know is that Super Mario 64's speedrunning community has kept the game alive long after it would have died out. Speedrunners like Ouija, Cheese, Simply, and Suigi continue to push this game to its absolute limits and show just how much effort was put into Mario's movement alone. Watching these runners pull off insane tricks and being able to complete the game faster than you would ever think it could be completed is incredibly satisfying, and I will always love tuning into a runner's stream just to see them play the game. Super Mario 64 is one of the most important games ever made. It not only redefined the platforming genre, but it created the framework for how modern 3D games should be made. Its non-linear progression and decision to let the player complete the game in any way they see fit makes it an infinitely replayable masterpiece. It's hard to get bored of this game. Its soundtrack perfectly sets the atmosphere for the different worlds you explore. It has the ability to make you feel emotion. These tracks hold memories that you will carry for the rest of your life. Urban legends like L is real and the rumor of a playable Luigi kept discussion of the game alive late into the 2000s. And the popularization of speedrunning brought the spotlight back on the game and has helped it maintain its popularity for decades. Super Mario 64 is not a perfect game, and it doesn't have to be. The impact this game had on the industry, and just people's lives in general, more than enough makes up for some of its minor shortcomings. The legacy of Super Mario 64 will never be forgotten.